Hey, this is Steve Kimes of Eugene Mennonite Church, and today we're still talking about Jesus the homeless. This is the third one. So Jesus said, this is the beginning of his great sermon. Remember the like, not just the Sermon on the Mount. This is the one in Luke called the Sermon on the Plain. Blessed are you who are poor, because God's kingdom belongs to you. And that's how Jesus starts his first major sermon. He starts talking about the poor. And Matthew says poor in spirit, and that's almost the same thing, but let's just keep it simple. So Jesus says, blessed are the poor. That's his phrase. And these are the poor who get God's kingdom and God's blessing. These are the God's people, the chosen ones. These are the ones who Jesus is talking about. So what exactly does poor mean? When you say blessed are the poor, who are the poor? And if you ask good upstanding Christians, they'll say that the poor are whoever sees their poverty before God, those who see themselves as weak and sinful and inadequate before a holy, transcendent God. In other words, the good upstanding Christians are trying to talk about themselves. We call ourselves sinners, therefore we're forgiven. We get to ignore our sin and hang out with God for eternity. And that's their idea of Jesus' blessing. That's who, quote, the poor are in Christian theology. It's really easy to get confused because most of the time, Jesus' words, the Sermon on the Mount, or whatever else, are spoken among well-dressed, clean, functional people. And so we think that Jesus must have been speaking to people just like that. But do you remember last time we talked about what Jesus' job was? Jesus was an outreach worker. So he didn't hang out with functional people. He hung out with the mentally ill, the sick, the feeble, the outcast, the homeless, the drunk, the sex workers, the people who woke up that morning seeing their life as hopeless. And then Jesus gives them just a little bit of hope to keep it. So Jesus said, blessed are you who are poor. He wasn't talking to functional people and dressed up the best way that they can on a Sunday morning. He's not talking to people who have to put themselves in a place to see themselves as inadequate before God. He's talking to people who are actually impoverished. These folks didn't have to make up a definition of poor. They knew what it meant. They don't need a spiritual or theological idea of what it means to be poor. It means not knowing where their food was coming that day. And that's why Jesus taught them, give us this day our daily bread, because they needed that prayer. And that's why Jesus said, blessed are you who hunger, for God will satisfy you. He's not talking about some kind of spiritual hunger. He meant people whose stomachs are gnawing at their insides. God is going to fill that today, and that's your blessing. When Jesus said, blessed are you who mourn, he didn't mean that we all needed to just be sorry for our sins, to grieve over our sins, and that's what he's talking about. He meant that we were mourning because our friend overdosed last week, and we haven't gotten over it yet. He meant that we were tearing up because the cops beat us up and we're afraid to ever see them again. He meant that our lives are so little that late last night we were thinking about ending it all, but we went to sleep instead and woke up today with a little bit more energy to try and keep going, but we don't know how we're going to feel tonight. So when Jesus said, blessed are you who mourn, for you will be comforted, Jesus is saying that God will make it a little bit better. It won't be all better today, but it'll be a little bit better. We'll be more ready to live because we have someone to help us a little bit. Until eventually God gives us a life that's actually worth living. That won't be today, probably won't be tomorrow either, but soon. Jesus is saying to people who suffer in pain every day, God is working for you. And soon there'll be a new world, and it will be your world. God will give you a place, a land, a residence, a full refrigerator, a dry eye, and it will be yours. And on the doorway of that space, at that time, God puts a sign. And it says, poor people only. Unless you have lost everything, don't come in. And in that place and in that time, God provides everything you need. And maybe maybe that place is right around the corner. Maybe that time is tomorrow. Maybe it's sooner than you think, or maybe it's not. We don't know. But when Jesus, the outreach worker, is involved, for sure, what he's going to offer us is going to be better than what we used to have. All right. Have a good day, guys.